and welcome back for another episode of Let's Talk About It. Today, I am joined by Ketan N. He is the CEO and co-founder of ThreatWorx, and today we are going to talk about third-party risk management. Ketan, welcome to the show.
Pleasure being here.
As far as I am aware about third-party risk management, I think that there's a lot of qualms in this space around traditional security questionnaires, in that they're slow, laborious, a lot of times inaccurate because of the amount of questions that they have to answer, sometimes up to 300 or more questions, and the data is just inaccurate. So what is the market like today as far as third-party risk management and evaluating risk exposure with or without these questionnaires?
Well, Amy, I'd like to say that you're pretty much up to date on what the current solutions are doing. and the reason is that we've been on the same mode of innovation for third-party risk for maybe more than a decade now. Things haven't moved a whole lot. You're right. We're still doing third-party risk management using questionnaires. It's still a more sort of assessment-driven and a more, self-attestation rather than, finding out what the real risk profile of their vendors is. And almost all the solutions in the market today, except some of the innovations that we are trying to bring to the market, are just a repeat of the same thing. You have your bunch of vendors, you're going to send them questionnaires, most of which are, like you said, very laborious, very, very tedious, and you're expecting your vendors to answer them in a very, honest and appropriate manner. But the vendors take their own, first of all, they take their own time with it. They also, may be not as incentivized to be totally honest about it. So things tend to, be, tend to sort of come out as misleading out of those questionnaires. And ultimately, the result is that enterprises have a very poor view of the vendor, of the risk of their vendor ecosystem. On the other hand, the enterprises today are looking at breaches happening more and more through the vendor risk vectors. And one of the statistics in that sense is that a third now of the breaches in the enterprises are now, as a result, directly attributable to a vendor. And that's not a surprise. Our networks have grown beyond traditional boundaries. They are now extending to our vendor ecosystem. They are now extending to not just our first party or third party, but fourth and fifth party vendors. And we are sharing more and more data with everyone. So it's not a surprise that the mismatch in the vendor the risk profiles that a typical enterprise has versus a smaller vendor would have is a problem that has still not been completely addressed. And that's the state of affairs today. There is need of innovation. There are ways to innovate through this, but I think there is a sort of let's keep up with the old way of things. And so there is a need to sort of push these new ideas through. And I'm glad that we are talking about this. This is one way to sort of bring out the innovation that is needed, that is desperately needed in this space.
Yeah. Why do you think that innovation is so slow in this space? And why do you think that it takes companies so long to answer these questionnaires or to assess third-party risk? Because really, especially as the company who has the software, right? Doesn't it? I've never understood why it takes them so much effort to help other companies evaluate their own risk. Is there no automation in this process? Is there no AI that can help people answer these questions? Are the questions somewhat standardized?
Well, let me answer the first smaller bit of question that you asked. Why is there not been innovation in the space? I'll give you an example. When you buy a house, you typically want to do a thorough inspection of the said property, right? I mean, you're not simply going to be happy inspecting just the locks that are on the house and saying, okay, this looks fine, this looks secure, and making your decision based on that. You want to be able to get inside. You want to be able to look inside the house. You want to be able to sort of determine whether there's lots of things, asbestos, termites, also a whole lot of things. You really want to get to those areas. With third parties, there is a barrier. And depending on the kind of leverage that you have with your third parties or your vendors, you may or may not be able to get into their houses. And that's what you really need to look at the inside picture. Right? How good is the vendor's security posture? To determine that, you need to be able to step into their house, or in our world, step over their firewalls. That is easier said than done. That's where our innovation is currently kind of being stagnant. And that's the reason why we send these, sort of good faith questionnaires over to the vendors. And to answer the second part of your question, yes, there is a fair bit of automation in terms of, there's smarter solutions now which are automating these questionnaires. However, again, it hits a bottleneck when it comes to somebody from the vendor side having to click through or, fill out these questions. That is something that a person or a human has to do, a team has to do. And that typically is not a straightforward process. Vendors are, again, incentivized to get through this process as quick as they can, because this is just a, hurdle in their, in their ability to do business with the enterprise. So they're not going to, they're not incentivized to be, quick, or they're incentivized to be quick, but not completely honest about this, right? And that's where the problems really are in terms of and that's the hurdle that we want to cross.
That seems so crazy. Is it not in the software vendor's best interest to be honest and to help the companies evaluate risk as fast as possible?
Absolutely. And there is, there should be, in an ideal world, yes, there should be a way to, sort of at least cross-check what the vendor has suggested their risk profile is as per their questionnaire. But there isn't. Again, what do you do? Send another questionnaire to the vendor saying, okay, do you want to take a second look at these answers? So there's no way to cross-check. And this is where the industry is today. We are working on good faith.
But okay.
Well,
is there risk management for third-party risk management? Because it just seems crazy that software vendors can just lie like that. Don't they have contracts with the companies that are buying their software so that they have to be truthful?
Yes, and in some cases there are clauses which are material which say if there is a breach, we'll be conducting an audit. But those are all after the fact. It's harder to sort of get any values if things are normal and you're not faced any breaches, which is what everybody wants to be in that space where, hey, this is not bothering me, this is not of concern to me so far. You're all good. But when it comes to the actual auditing and the forensics, and then you have to get into the legal teams come into play, and then they have to sort of get into all the details of acquiring all the information, acquiring all the evidence. That evidence, again, has to come from the vendors if there was a breach as a result of the vendor exposure, right? So again, there's a lot of room for these processes to fall apart. And again, like I said, it is all in hindsight. When there is a breach, these clauses are activated, and you're just firefighting, or you're just cleaning up the mess at that point.
And is AI playing a role in the space in third-party risk management today?
Absolutely. Now when we started off, when we looked at the space, there is just a tremendous amount of information that is floating around, which can lead us to potential clues on what the threats or vulnerabilities might be emerging, which are directly related to our vendor ecosystem, right? And that part of the universe, which you call the threat intelligence or the vulnerability intelligence, is growing like crazy. Every year you see the number of vulnerabilities getting reported I mean, they are almost, doubling every couple of years, right? So we are putting out more software, more third-party applications are getting written. And so this volume of threats and vulnerabilities is increasing in that proportion. So one way where AI is helping us is to be able to make sense out of this huge volume of information. This is a problem which is beyond the scope of sort of human curation or so-called security analysts. Mm-hmm. And they will continue to play a role, but it's going to be more of a supervisory role. Today, AI or today the machines are capable of analyzing large volumes of data very, very well, as we know. And so we are employing a lot of these ideas into, first of all, this correlation of threat intelligence. That's number one. And secondly, if and when we have this snapshot of the vendor's ecosystem, a true snapshot, we need to again do this correlation and figure out what the relevant threats. We can't be just pointing every threat that shows up to the vendor and saying, what are you doing about this and that? So it has to be a very targeted conversation with the vendor saying, these are the things that we know are affecting you and we need you to take action on those. So that signal needs to be as precise as it can be so that this conversation with the vendor, because the vendor is not going to drop everything and just, fix the issues that you want to just because you said that. So there is this delicate balance that we need to maintain, and we need to be able to sort of incentivize the vendor to say, okay, here's what we found in your environment based on the information that you shared with us, and we are going to use this. Here's how you want to address it, right? So that we are both secure in this journey.
Wait, so in that instance, does that mean that the vendors are just giving like boatloads of data to the companies that are evaluating them so that they could use it to query an AI platform, or?
That depends. That depends on the vendor. That depends on, again, the relationship that the enterprise has with those vendors and their risk profiles. Not all vendors are going to share all of this information with you.
Okay.
Right? Even today with the questionnaires, some vendors will choose to ignore them. Some of the, the vendors who are more influential than you, they will just ignore it. I mean, you're not going to get a questionnaire answered by AWS, even if AWS is your vendor or Amazon is your vendor. It's not practical. Right. So we're just assuming that AWS is taking care of their own security. Well, they're actually, entire cloud ecosystem is today working on the assumption that the consumers of the cloud are taking care of the security, not AWS. So you can't really go after AWS for if something happens to your environment in the cloud. But having said that, the response to the request for information from your vendors will all be different. They'll be based on their ability. Really small vendors who are not so tech savvy may not be able to respond to those queries. Right? You're talking about, the really obscure vendors who are using, obviously, who are IT enabled, who are using some sort of a software infrastructure, but just don't have the necessary personnel or the time to devote to this. So there's always going to be this, differing standards in terms of what information we get from the vendors, but we should not stop there. I don't think that's a reason for us to, it's not an all or nothing kind of a deal. I think we can still get all the information that we can from do our best and get a sort of a consistent view of what the real vendor is. And that's the sort of an incremental goal that we are promoting to our enterprises, to our customers that we work with.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. And how do you think that the future of third-party risk management will change? Because it seems quite inefficient as it stands because of the lack of innovation, as you mentioned. Yeah. So how do you think that that's going to change in 5 years from now, let's say?
That's an excellent question. So I'm an optimist, and I think that we are all, sort of converging towards a future where many of these ideas will happen and will come to bear. A lot of this is already getting pushed through as mandates and standards that are coming down from the federal government that have to be implemented by, let's say, medical service providers and medical technology manufacturers are now mandated to share their own SBOMs. So they're looking for solutions which can analyze SBOMs and do this thing. So the part of it will be driven through mandates. Part of it is a general awareness that while we are secure, while we are now spending millions and perhaps even billions of dollars to secure our own enterprise networks, it's also important to now extend that security blanket to our third-party, fourth-party vendors, right? So there is that, and there's also the need. I see that once the vendors start participating in this process in a meaningful way, meaning that they are actually a part of this process and not merely rubber stamping the questionnaires that they're getting. If they're actually getting a peek or a view into their own exposure, then they're I think they're much more incentivized to be participants of this process rather than I just have to do this because my vendor asked me to, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think there's also an added layer of, I don't know, judgmentalness of like, how did you not know? But how you're describing third-party risk management, of course people don't know. It's so complicated and convoluted, and seems scary or untrustworthy to put all of that risk into a third-party hand, which is the whole point of it.
Right. And we've always considered ourselves secure. We've always but now, I mean, think about it. I mean, we're spending a lot of money to make our own network secure. We're doing that. But you will always have some part of the ecosystem which is not covered. And those are our blind spots. Those are the things that are now keeping us vulnerable.
Yeah.
So this is a natural extension of that same thought, but it has to be driven by some really groundbreaking innovation which we are trying to make.
Yeah.
This need not be a questionnaire. This need not be just a good faith attempt to make us feel good about our vendor ecosystem. This has to be evidence based, and that's where I think the industry is headed.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. You've sufficiently blown my mind about vendor ecosystems and third-party risk. I didn't know that people could just lie or exaggerate.
Well, I mean, I have to preface this, right? I mean, this is not an attempt to malign the. I mean, they are all doing their best, right? We are all trying to be good citizens of this world, but sometimes the lack of incentive is one thing, and the other thing is just this naivete that we have. I don't really know. I mean, I've seen this 300 page questionnaire. Sometimes there are 300 pages, and you really don't know beyond a certain point what do I answer. So I'm just going to take the right boxes to get through it.
Wait, who is answering these questionnaires? Is it like security engineers in the pre-sales process, or are the actual security teams getting involved in helping to assess the third-party risk?
Are you saying who is answering them? You asked for answering. Well, on the vendor side, you can imagine what that might be, right? I mean, it's a small vendor. Let's say it's your, your small payroll vendor or one of your legal teams, right? Private legal teams whom you hired, right? And you're sharing a lot of your confidential information with them. They are your vendors, right? They are not equipped to answer security questionnaires, certainly. They don't have anybody on staff who can answer these, right? So they're lawyers by profession. Probably they can answer them pretty well, but consider the truthfulness of those, because they don't just have the information that you are asking them. What is the level of the CIS benchmarks that you are testing your cloud against? I don't know. Hey, does anybody in the office know what they're doing here? Like, there's nobody. Right?
Yeah, the one guy. He's too busy to talk to you.
Yes, and maybe not even that one guy. So what am I going to do? Am I going to wait because I need to complete this so that the contract goes ahead and we get renewed? So the easiest thing for me to do is, again, this is not out of malice, but maybe just to make things expedient, check the right box and say, yeah, go ahead. Right. So that's what the reality of things is out there, as harsh as it may seem. That's what it is, and it is not due to the lack of solution. We have plenty of solution doing the same thing here. I think we need a different approach. I think we need a more evidence-based approach, like I said.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what that approach is and where this goes. It seems like a very exciting time for the industry.
It is.
So if we want to find you and what you're working on online, where can we look?
So our website is ThreatWorx.io, threat and WORX.io. And you can reach us at info@threatworx.io if you want a demo, if you want to chat with us, if you want to discuss your third-party risk management requirements, if you need a new perspective on that. Please do reach out to us and we'll be happy to discuss this. And we also have a partnership with D3. We have a solution in place for third-party risk as a plugin. So we are happy to discuss that as well with you.
Lovely. I will put that link in the show notes in case anybody wants to find that. And thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Amy. It was a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.